So real quick, I want to introduce our panelists. So first we have Justin Siebert. He's from Memphis, Tennessee. He founded the AP chemistry program at his school, and I consider him an expert in getting students of all backgrounds excited and accomplished in science. We also have Roberta. She's joining us from Hudson, Wisconsin, and she has a doctorate in chemistry, and last year was actually her first year teaching AP chemistry, but she had a 100% pass rate. So even if she doesn't, I call her an expert. And we also have Abby Vega, and she is the chemistry content writer for Positive Physics and Chemistry. So first, I just wanted to start off with Justin and Roberta. If you could please explain what the structure of your class looks like. So, like, if you could say, what does a typical week or a typical unit in your class look like? And then also, if you don't mind mentioning kind of what resources do you use as you go through a typical week or a typical unit? And maybe, Roberta, I could start with you.
Um, for my classes, because we are very limited on time, it's pretty much no nonsense. A unit will start with, by the way, here's your tests are in the bin for test corrections. Let's get started on the new material. And we will dive right into teaching the first few topics. I do teach by the CED order, except I flip units 5 and 6. And so I will cover a certain number of topics in the notes, very brief notes. Students were supposed to have read them ahead of time. And I will go through and show some examples. Then it's time for them to do work. Now, if it's more than after the first day, then we're going over the answer keys for the previous day's work. The day starts out with a check question for them based on some things that are common mistakes that students forget when it comes test time. So it's just constantly recycling it for them throughout the year. While they're doing the check question, I'm checking that they did their daily work. We go through the keys. There might be a quiz, and then we'll go on and do the new material, and then they have work time. The labs are usually toward the end of a unit. Their last day before the test, we will go over the last pieces. They'll have their lab. We will have Emily Miller's multiple choice mayhem as a review, which is nice for training on multiple choice questions. And then the test. So it goes very, very quick. I cover 2 to 4 topics a day out of the CED because that's what I have to do to get through all the material.
Gotcha. And can I ask
resources I use are the I do, we do, you do's from Emily Miller. If you're on the AP Chemistry Facebook teacher group, she shares them freely there. They are a collection of notes with daily work problems. And then I put together my own extra practice problems that the students are supposed to work on throughout the unit.
Gotcha. And how often do you how often do you do assessments and how often do you do labs?
I'm doing quizzes 2 to 3 times per unit. And they're 10-minute, 15-minute max quizzes. They're short. And then I curve them by AP cutoffs. I drop the lowest ones that are meant to be low stakes for the kids to figure out what they know and don't know yet. And then the major unit test. The labs are scheduled about 1 per unit, but I can't really do much more than that because of the timing. We are so limited on the time I'm given in my school. I'm given 86 minutes every other day. And so and I start right around the end of August. And so I really don't have a lot of extra time. Any snow days we get in Wisconsin wipes out labs before it wipes out anything else because I just don't have the time.
Gotcha. And Lisa was asking in the chat, is that 86 per minutes a day every other day for the full year?
It is.
Okay.
But I aim to finish up unit 9 the first week of April, and then the rest of April is review for the test.
Gotcha. And when you said like kind of one lab and 3 to 4 quizzes per unit, how long does it take you to get? Are you referring to the AP units?
Yes.
Okay.
I do 1 unit by unit of the CED. I basically, the only way I'm going to be able to stay on track is to set up my plan to make sure I cover every one of the learning objectives and move and get through the material. I can't slow down.
Gotcha. Great. And then
It's supposed to be, yes, it is. But my school does not give me the time to do it as far as the number of labs required being an absolute.
gotcha.
The chat.
And then thank you. And then Justin, same thing. What does a typical, like, how is your class structured? What is a typical week or
Yeah,
unit?
yeah. Real quick, the number of labs question. If you're new to teaching AP, you have to agree to a number of labs, but there's no really, nobody holds you to that. Nobody cares. College Board doesn't care.
It's supposed to be 25% of instruction time. It's not a number of labs, but yeah.
I don't think there's many AP chemistry teachers that do 25% of their instructional time as labs. I love doing labs, but it's I don't know. All right, yeah, so my number of minutes is pretty similar. We do on Mondays, on a full week on a Monday, I have them just for 35 minutes. And then I'll have them a 90-minute block and another 90-minute block later in the week. So two 90-minute blocks and a 35-minute short class. So what I've started doing is on the short classes on Mondays, I have a system called skill checks. And so I've split up each unit into about 3 or 4 kind of like main skills. And what they'll do is I've got like a little kind of half sheet quiz. I've got a version A, B, C, and D for each of those 4 skills in each unit. And so on their homework for Mondays is always like, hey, here's a bunch of resources, including positive chemistry. I'll link the relevant topics for each of the different skills. And then they choose like what they work on for that homework, and they come in and then they take a quiz over whichever skills. And so I've got a tracker. They have to pass a certain number of skills in order to get a certain grade for the class. So that's one of the big ways that I do assessments. I also do unit tests, but the skill checks is a way for me to know, like, okay, do you know how to calculate or find the empirical formula based on the mass percents, or do you know how to compare to atoms and explain the periodic trend? So I can break those down into the more granular skills. So that's we do that on Mondays, and then Wednesdays and Fridays I kind of use a flipped classroom sort of model. And so they'll have some homework ahead of time. That's usually some combination of, it might be a reading from their textbook. We use Tro. I think it's fine, but we don't use the textbook a ton except for some readings. A lot of the stuff I've done a video for. So I've got certain topics on my YouTube channel that I'll assign videos from, and then sometimes I might use another teacher's YouTube video as well. I probably need to use more of the AP classroom resources and use some of their videos. I just haven't as much as far as those go. Yeah, and so then in class we're trying to spend as much time as possible practicing. So I also do a thing that I've started doing is the beginning of those 90-minute blocks, I'll give a short, what I call a do now quiz. And it's it'll just be 5 questions, pretty low stakes on review content. And it's just kind of a way to bring back old skills. I think it's one of the hardest things for me. And so I've tried to systematize it. Is just bringing back, like, we're moving so fast through everything, on time, and just trying to find a way for, okay, you learned something 3 months ago maybe, and it's like, all right, how do you keep that stuff fresh? And so it's a way for me to kind of systematize that and get students doing stuff from previous units. So yeah, that's kind of a rambling overview of some of the stuff that I do. I try to do labs too. It ends up being about 1 per unit. It's a philosophical thing where I'm like, I feel like the labs are important just for like my students, but they're not important for their AP scores. But it's also just like the students like the labs too. So I think there's a lot of value in labs, but if your only goal is to maximize the AP scores, then the labs are probably a lot, like Roberta said, the first thing that can be cut generally.
With my extra practice packets that they're supposed to work through each unit, the last question, the last page or 2 is always spiral review to keep reminding them of previous units as well. But yeah, it's really important to make sure they don't forget. As far as the labs, what I have done is I've tried to incorporate some into my April review time. So I'll have a very shortcut cookbook type version. We do acid-base titration during Unit 8, but I'll bring a redox titration in during the review. That'll be our chance to review redox, our chance to review titrations, and I'll try and work them in then so they still have experience with them, but make it very, very short.
Gotcha. I wanted to ask, Lisa had a great question in the chat. Anything you can share about the level of students coming into your AP chemistry class? And I know people might have very different thoughts and opinions on that, but yeah, could you guys speak to what is your class like, and if you have any advice on requirements or anything like that?
Our class, about a third of my students have never had chem before. And some who had it 2 years ago, so they don't remember a lot. But the third that haven't had chem are coming in either as extremely advanced sophomores who are very fast learners, or they're coming out of AP Physics. So they're all ready to work and to think at that level, which makes it a lot easier. The ones who've had chem generally tend to be the ones that I have to remind them how things work and coax them along more. So I do have sophomores through seniors.
I generally have almost always have all juniors. Sometimes I have a few seniors, but I'm at a small private school, but it's a private school where almost everybody's on needs-based scholarship to be there. So we serve students from low-income backgrounds primarily. I'd say, and we're also a small school. Our graduating classes are usually around 50 students, but I might have, 8, 9, 10 students in my AP chemistry class. So it's like a high percentage of students when you look at it like that. So I'd say I've got students that come in who are pretty strong chemistry students, and I have some that are a little shaky on stoichiometry and that sort of thing. So I usually have a little bit of a mix. Yeah, and for most of them, it's their first AP Science class. They've probably had some of them may have had like AP US History the previous year. Some of them might be in AP English concurrently. So it's a big shift for a lot of them from regular science classes to their first AP Science class. And so I don't know, I have a lot of students who are they're struggling with like suddenly not feeling like they're super smart and really good at everything without having to study. That's the first time that they've had to learn content, much faster.
They've had to spend a significant amount of time outside of class working on stuff.
Right. Yeah, most of them haven't until they get to AP chemistry. Yeah.
Gotcha. Quick question in the chat from Bruce. Is he asked about Justin's YouTube channel? By the way, it is awesome. It is so like I've made some videos that are just like sharing the screen. His videos are next level. I'm going to share the link to his website and his YouTube channel when I share the recording with everyone who's attended or signed up. But definitely check out Justin's YouTube channel. It is amazing. Yeah, let me move on to a second question. This was the one that when people signed up, this was the most common thing that I heard, is how do you handle pacing in your class? And including, I know, Roberta, you talked about how much time do you try to leave for review at the end? And then I know we had somebody ask about, do you follow the CED order? And I think, Roberta, you touched on that before. But yeah, Roberta, if you don't mind sharing, how do you handle pacing in your class?
Sure. Let me just, if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen here.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. This is where we are right now. I have a calendar like this. It's shared up, and I actually have it planned out for the whole year at the beginning of the year. And this is what we cover. Literally, this is how fast we have to go through materials. Yeah, on Friday, I told kids, you guys are going to design your own calorimetry lab. You're going to determine what metal I'm giving you by figuring out its specific heat, and you're going to figure out a way to do it. And you have until the 11th to come up with a plan. And so, so they are constantly having to work outside of class for this class, just because we have to go through things this quickly. We're going to cover stuff really fast along the way here. You can kind of see the pacing. Now I do cover this, I go by CED order, except I do unit 6, which is thermochemistry, right after unit 4, which is reactions, because I like because a lot of those calculations can also look stoichiometric when you're looking at those calorimetry calculations. And we've just done stoichiometry. It looks a lot like that. And more importantly, I like how rates flow into equilibrium. To me, that makes sense. So I tend to switch units 6 and 5 when I'm teaching it.
And yeah, Justin, maybe same question to you.
Yeah, I just that's making me think of the switching unit 5 and 6. That makes a lot of sense. I follow CED order pretty closely, except for I do unit 4 first. So stoichiometry is pretty foundational. And they're usually coming from Chem 1 and for my students. So I do a summer assignment. If you want to buy my summer assignment, I've got a blog post on my website where I share all that if you want to see it. So they do the summer assignment, which covers a lot of review and a few new topics within stoichiometry. And then we start with stoichiometry review at the beginning of the year. We go through types of reactions, and then we start with unit 1 and go forward from there. And the main reason that I do unit 4 first is, like I said, that just to get into stoichiometry quick and keep those skills sharp before we kind of go back to unit 1 and keep going with that. It felt like I could give that as a summer assignment, whereas unit 1 atomic structure stuff, it's a little bit more conceptual than the stoichiometry, which is kind of more calculation kind of stuff, where it just felt like that was a little bit easier for them to do on their own over the summer. So, and then pacing, I'd say my pacing is pretty similar to what Roberta was saying. We try to finish up beginning of April, use all of April for review. It's so fast though. I mean, there's constantly times where I'm moving on to a new topic or a new unit, and I'm like, man, I just wish I had another week with this stuff for them to practice it. But that's kind of what they sign up for better or for worse. So yeah, we keep it moving. Yeah, pretty quick.
Gotcha. All right. And then my other question is a little bit more wide open. Just what other tips do you have especially for new AP teachers? Let me start with Roberta on that one.
Set your pacing. Don't slow down. It's too tempting when kids are struggling to slow down, and then they never learn to push through the struggle, and you're not going to get through the material. I took that advice that I got the summer before I took over this class from the previous teacher. I took that advice from another expert out there and set up my calendar and stuck to it. And I found that students who were tempted to try and slow things down, once they realized I wasn't going to, they picked up their pace. And then they came in during our advisory time, which is set up as an academic help time. They would come in before after school, whereas they weren't doing that until they realized I wasn't going to slow down. So the only thing that changes, that calendar gets updated only when there's snow days and I need to shift my schedule to get rid of a lab or something like that. Otherwise, that pacing is set for the year.
Gotcha. What would you say, like maybe if there's a first year teacher out there who's started and they're already a little bit behind, would you have any advice for them?
As far as that goes, I would say that I am probably not the best person to say what could be cut and what can't. In that case, if you are on Facebook, the AP Chemistry Teachers Facebook group is incredibly helpful. They were amazingly helpful my first year through this course, and they are the ones who know what is most likely something you can neglect. Significant figures is 1 point on the entire AP exam. If your kids are struggling with it, forget it. That kind of thing. But there are topics that people tend to like to spend a lot of time on that aren't even in the CED. So make sure that you're covering only what is going to be required, especially if you're already behind. You're covering colligative properties and molality. Don't. If you just don't have the time if you're already behind.
But that, as much as you can just use the old practice tests and work through them, I think that's really helpful. Even stuff that's shared I was just on something recently, and it had even stuff that's shared on the Facebook sometimes. There was a worksheet that I found it was actually in the I do, we do, you do stuff, which is usually pretty good, but it had like RF factor calculations for chromatography, and I was like, that's not on there, so just, I think, yeah, like do practice problems in the previous test. That's helpful. Ask people in the group. And then look at the AP standards themselves. A lot of times they specify it's like, here's what students have to do. And also here's a clarification about like what's not included on the thing. So I think CED order is helpful with that. And just read the actual standards and what's in there.
Gotcha. one other thing I wanted to add, and that was actually a tip I learned from Roberta's colleague on the physics side, was really think about what your students are capable of like doing in class versus outside of class. So if there is something that they can learn from a resource outside of class, really value that class time and realize like maybe they can achieve this part outside of class because the class time, like everyone has emphasized, is really, really limited. All right. And then
Yeah,
the
one more
next
thing I would
thing,
mention
oh,
here
yeah.
is that I do give them the entire practice packet, and I provide extra practice problems for them. Only some of them are required for daily work, but all of my answer keys for my problems, not the resources I'm using, which are not supposed to be put online, but my own practice problems, all the answer keys are put on our Google Classroom from the beginning of the unit. So they can always be learning from how I've laid out solutions to problems and figuring out what they're struggling with. Provide those resources for them outside of time when they can't get a hold of you directly.
Yeah. I had something else I was gonna say. Oh yeah, I feel like if you've got students that are similar to mine who are in an AP class for the first time, also take some time to like teach them how to study and how to learn. Like, what does that mean for your class? I've had a lot of students that come in and they'll fail a quiz, and I'll ask them like, "Hey, how did you prepare for it?" And they're like, "I reread my notes, and I look back over the problems I had done." And it's like, oh, well, those are the worst ways to study. Like they need to learn how to do that, and if they're in their first kind of really hard science class, they might not know. So teach them like, hey, here's how you study for the class. You find practice problems, provide some for them, or help them figure out how to find them. So give them more practice than what they will be able to do, so they've always got problems to pull from, and then give them opportunities to do that practice. AP, I know we're here for positive chemistry, but the redesign of the course is, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here on a panel for the thing. Like, it's the redesign is really closely aligned with AP chemistry. There's a lot of stuff where it's even the way the stuff is structured on there, it's just really well aligned. So I would highly recommend the AP chemistry stuff on positive chemistry. It can be hard sometimes to figure out, like, it doesn't follow CED order, so it's hard to find some of the stuff on there some of the times, but it's pretty closely aligned, even getting into the kinetics and thermodynamics. And there's been very few things I've not been able to find. Photoelectron spectroscopy is an example of one where it's like I have a hard time finding resources for that, but I'm like, oh, there it is on the positive chemistry redesigned chemistry course. So was that question 4? I forget the questions.
No, that was perfect. Yeah, and then I just wanted to open it up if anybody has questions from the audience. I know we have a relatively small group. Feel free to put a question in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask. And while maybe people are typing in questions, real quick, my last expert is, thank you, Justin, for the perfect transition, is Abby. So Abby is the author of all of the chemistry content on positive chemistry. And yeah, after we see if there are questions from the audience, Abby, I was going to have you talk a little bit about kind of how you made how you wrote the curriculum for positive chemistry, and maybe show people the review. By the way, the review, the semester review and exam are completely free if you want to use them. And I really want this to help people. It's always, if your school can't pay for it, the non-free units, then it's pay what you can. So we always really want people to use it. But first, we had a question in the chat from Chief Free. What are challenging? Yeah, what are the, Roberta and Justin, what are the, like, what topics have your students maybe found the most challenging?
Unit 8, acids and bases, always. But yeah, even when you're introducing it in Unit 4 for chemical reactions, that one is a challenge. And when we get to the equilibria side of it, it's a challenge. So if you have time to spare, that might be where I'd probably put a little more extra time.
And the acids bases unit's covered quite a bit. I feel like it's one that people sometimes skip, but it's like usually in there a pretty high percentage.
Yeah, it's like 15-20% of the exam, isn't it? It's like close to that. It's really a high percentage.
Yeah, it's a lot. My students have always thought thermo is hard. I don't think it is, but Maybe I'm just not teaching that one as well. It's all hard. It's all hard, but it's all easy. I feel like I'm constantly saying that to students, like this. The topics aren't necessarily hard. The hardest thing I think of the class and the questions is seeing a question and trying to pull this piece of information and trying to determine what is relevant and what is important in this question. There's a question that always comes up from a release test that I put in my kinetics test, and it's one where there's this big stimulus and there's table and there's all this information, and it's like you have to determine. It says something about like the average kinetic energy, like does the average kinetic energy more or less or the same or something, but both things are the same temperature, and so if you just can ignore all the stuff in the question and be like, oh, it's the same temperature, so the molecules in both of these things or both of these containers have the same average kinetic energy. Oh, that the question's super easy. But the tricky part is you gotta realize like, oh, that's the thing that's important in this, and all the rest of it's irrelevant. And so I think that's just a big shift for students. They're used to being in classes where, they learn how to do something and they see a question that's just like it on a test. And the AP chemistry tests they're just not like that. So students seeing the things in lots of different forms, asking questions in different ways, doing practice multiple choice that are from the AP exam, like all those things to help them figure out like, hey, what are the things that are important to this, and pulling out a piece of information that they haven't thought about for a while.
There's a question on AP Classroom that's electrochemistry based. It's this big electrochemistry diagram, and it asks what's wrong with the diagram or whatever. And literally it's that the equation for the formation of water wasn't balanced. That's it. That's what they had to identify as what's wrong with the question. The diagram.
Hilarious. Great. I guess this actually is another good transition. Ludwig asked, I have a problem finding test questions to print a test. Does anyone use a test making program? Yeah, so there's not maybe a test making program, but maybe that's a good transition to have Abby show positive chemistry. Just a little bit of background. The site was originally called Positive Physics. It's now Positive Physics and Positive Chemistry. I built it out in my classroom where I taught in Memphis, really because my textbook was not meeting students at their level. I designed it really to be accessible for lower level students, but we found like practice on the fundamentals was really essential for everyone. And now there's a lot of teachers that use it for AP Physics and AP Chemistry. If for those teachers who use it, it fits pretty nicely with kind of below the AP classroom material. So a lot of teachers use those in conjunction. I know Justin uses it with his AP chemistry students. Roberta uses it with her general chemistry students, but not her AP ones. And Roberta, you can hand up. Yeah.
And my physics students.
And
one thing I would mention is, even if I know they're going to show you how to use the system, but if you don't want to give your tests online or whatever, I still cut diagrams from Positive Physics constantly for my quizzes and tests, and then make the problems around them similar to what he's got. So his program there is fantastic for finding sources of really good fundamental questions to find out what kids know, even if you're not going to use it as an online platform on test day.
Gotcha. And just a heads up, I know there are some sites that are picky about like, oh, you shouldn't screenshot from us. You have full permission to copy and screenshot and do whatever you want from Positive Physics. We really want it to help. But yeah, let me turn this over to Abby if you're good with that. Roberta and Justin, actually, if I know you guys know how to use Positive Physics and Chemistry, if you guys want to hop off, no worries. And I really appreciate you guys coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay.
Thanks again.
So I'll share my screen now.
Perfect.
Oh, it appears I'm having some issues with my Zoom preferences. Are there any more questions in the chat you guys can discuss while I sort this out?
No, and Abby, worst case scenario, I can also I can share from my end, and you can just tell me where to go if that's
good
easy.
idea.
Okay.
Okay.
Give me.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. All right. Let me share my screen real quick. There we go. All right.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
And so, yeah, let me navigate over to, so this is Positive Physics and Chemistry. You can go to positivephysics.org or positivechemistry.org. Then there is this course menu right here. This is our new updated course that's much more AP aligned that people were talking about the redesign. This is the one that Abby built. And so, yeah, I'm going to hop over to this one. And Abby, did you want me to show them the
Yeah,
review? Okay.
well, so firstly, you can see like all
Okay.
the units listed out there. And if Jack scrolls down a bit, like at least the first half of those units are completely ready for you to use. And then towards the end, those units, some of them are still in beta, so they're still being fleshed out, but they'll be ready soon. So this should cover absolutely everything that's on the AP Chemistry CED. It covers a few extra bits and pieces here and there that I know lots of teachers teach, because our goal is for this to be useful for any teacher. So like people have mentioned, maybe watch out to make sure if you're using this site, you're not teaching something you don't need to teach if you're running out of time. So if you click on the semester review, Jack. So here we've basically taken a small selection of questions from each unit from the first semester. And you can have students practice these in work mode. So there they can practice them, you can restart them, they can do them as many times as they want. Or if you want to use it as a test, for example, you can go into assessment mode. And from there, you kind of select how many questions of each type you want to appear on your assessment. And then you can give that to students. And the nice thing is that everything in there is randomized. So students will get either different questions or the same question with different numbers or different elements. So some teachers use this as their, as part of their final exam, and some teachers use it as practice for students coming up to their final exam. So that unit is free and available for anyone to use. I'll just show you an example question. Jack, if you could head to unit 4, I think, or maybe unit 3. Let's see.
Of the semester review, or actually?
Oh, sorry, of just the regular.
Okay, sure.
Let's go to unit 3.
Okay.
So just to give you a little overview of a general unit. So we start with some review that has a kind of random selection of questions from previous units. So again, it's trying to spiral and make sure kids aren't forgetting stuff that they did a while ago. And then when you go into a skill, like Jack just showed us. Jack, maybe you could click on one of the, if you scroll down and maybe go on the Atomic Structure 3 skill. So when you open that, first it comes to this lesson page, and there we have a little description and also a video showing how to do this type of problem. And then they can go ahead and click on the numbers at the top right to open up each question. So we can do a little example here. If you get the answer right the first time, so do you want to give it a go, Jack?
I'm a physics teacher. Don't make me do this.
So we've been told that the symbol is B, boron. So Jack, if you go to the reference sheet, there's a little thing in the top left you can click. Top right. We're finding boron. That's got atomic number 5.
I can try it. All right. So I know that boron should have 5 protons. By the way, anything that is in blue is a randomized value. So each student is going to have like a different value here. So it's great. In my classroom, it made them they would share strategies with each other instead of just sharing answers. And then if I get a question wrong, I know this was neutral, so it should be 5, but I'm going to put in 4. Then a little red X shows up, but they can fix it. Turns a slightly different color green. If I zoom out a little bit, if our faces aren't in the way, in the upper right-hand corner, it keeps track of their completion score. That means they got it right eventually. And then their accuracy score means they got it right on the first try.
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of gives you an idea of how it works. And this is obviously a really simple question, but we have now covered everything that's on AP Chemistry, and we're trying to cover all the content to like the depth of understanding you would need. But like Jack mentioned earlier, it's not a replacement for AP practice. So you still need to be having kids going on AP Classroom or getting questions from AP Classroom to have kids practice actual AP problems. But this should help to kind of bridge the gap between I don't know how to do anything to finally be able to answer those problems.
Gotcha. One question in the chat. Lugwood said, I would love to try this program, but my district has closed money for the year. So just real quick on that, the semester review is completely free. And then if your school can't pay for it, it's always pay what you can pricing. I built this out of a classroom where I once had to pay for my own paper and copies. And so I really understand that that situation. And so, yeah, if it really is, you just choose, if you want to use it, please ask your school, but we will really want it to help you. So you choose your own price if your school can't pay for it. And again, try those free units first. And then if you like it, we'll figure something out. My email address is all over the website if you need the pay what you can option. But yeah, that's a quick summary. I highly recommend a really good way to try this and to see if you like it is to try the semester review, which is completely free anyways. I have my students do this like the last week or so before my semester exam. And then I use this semester exam. Essentially what this semester exam does is it pulls random questions from each skill. So 5 of the vocabulary and concepts, 2 of the lab safety, 2 from the numbers and measurements, and organizes it into to an exam. All right, and yeah, Roberta just put in the chat that if you ever have any questions, please do reach out to me. Email is the easiest way. Yeah, I'm very lucky that I now get to do this as my full-time job, and my favorite part about it is helping teachers out. So if you have any questions anytime, definitely reach out. You can or schedule a you can schedule a demo with me if you want more of this. But we're right at about the 45 minutes that I promised people. So thank you again, everyone, for showing up. I'm going to send out a recording to everybody who signed up, a copy of the calendar that Roberta showed you earlier, a link to Justin's Siebert Science website, which has his amazing videos, not just for chemistry, but also has some amazing anatomy and physiology, if that is helpful. And yeah, I think he has some more resources on there, like his summer assignment and everything. So hope this was helpful for you all. Again, Abby, Roberta, and Justin, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it.